Friends, in this video, we will learn about Lorenz curve, which is an economic curve, basically important curve in economy, right? So let's first get the basics of Lorenz curve. It is basically a graphical representation of income inequality, right? So it basically represents income inequality in a graphical manner. And a typical Lorenz curve actually looks like this. This red line that you are seeing is basically the Lorenz curve. So as you can see, it is basically concave upward, right? That means bending downwards, right? And if you see this graph is basically representing cumulative share of income on y-axis. This is cumulative share of income versus cumulative percentage of people who earn that income. So this cumulative percentage of population or people who earn that income is represented on x-axis, and this cumulative portion of income is represented on y-axis, right? Now let's understand this what this curve tells in a bit detail. So this is the Lorenz curve, right? And this is the cumulative percentage of population represented on x-axis, right? And this is cumulative portion of income that is earned on y-axis, right? So first let's understand what does this cumulative means, right? What is this cumulative, right? So cumulative means that sum of all starting from the lowest to a certain level, right? Now what does it mean exactly? So in order to, let's say there are total 100 people, and based on their income we have to draw the Lorenz curve, right? So what we will do first, that we will first arrange these 100 people in ascending order of their income, right? So the poorest one first, right? Then the next poorest, then the next poorest, and likewise the 100 people, the richest one among these 100 people. So once we have basically arranged these 100 people in ascending order based on their income, what we will do, we will find out the poorest 20% people and find out their total income earned. So let's say they earn 5% of total income, right? Then we will find out the poorest 40%, right? So when we say poorest 40%, that will be starting from this first poorest person, right? So that means this will include the poorest 20%, right, plus the next poorest 20%, right? So that's how it will basically include the overall poorest 40%, right? So this is what this cumulative means actually, right? Now if you see, this Lorenz curve is always accompanied by this blue line, which is line of equality basically, right? So what exactly it is, let's first understand that. So this line of equality, if you see, basically represents this line of equality. The blue line equality is basically the ideal situation when wealth is being distributed equally. Wealth or income, whatever you might like to say, distributed exactly equally, right? So how exactly it is representing line of equality, let's see here. So on this line of equality, if you see, for the first 20% population, if you see, the total income will be 20%. That means first 20% are earning 20%, right? The next 20%, the first 40%, if you see on this line of equality, they are earning 40%. So first 40% are earning 40%. That means we have already seen that the first 20% are earning 20%, right? And first 40% are also earning 40%. That means the apart this first 40%, if you see, this will include the first 20% plus next 20%, right? And they are earning in total 40%. That means these next 20% are also earning 20%, because this first 20% are earning 20%, right? So that means the first 20% are earning 20% and next 20% are also earning 20%. That means the wealth or the income is being distributed equally among each 20%, right? So that is how this is basically line of equality, the ideal situation when the wealth or the income is being distributed equally among each 20% or any percentage of population, right? But if you see, this Lorenz curve will always be bending downwards as compared to line of equality. So line of equality lies here, but this Lorenz curve will be a slightly down from this line of equality, right? So what does this bend mean? If you see here, for the 20% income, right, we found that on the line of equality there are 20% cumulative population, but for the 20% income on the Lorenz curve there will be a higher percentage of population. So this will be something around, let's say, 35%. That means 35% people are earning 20%, right, not 20%, right? That means to earn 20% of total income, more number of people you will have to include on Lorenz curve, right? So that is how it basically, the downward bend actually shows the inequality, right? That means the first 30% are earning 20%, right? And in order to earn 40%, if you extend this line further, so this will be something around 70%. In order to earn 40% of the income, right, you will have to basically add income of 70% people, right? So the income is not being distributed equally on the Lorenz curve. So that is how this Lorenz curve actually represents inequality. And you can imagine, or you can visualize that more the curve bend downwards, so more it is farther from this line of equality, more will be the inequality, right? So more the bend, more is inequality, right? So, and if you draw this Lorenz curve, so if this Lorenz curve shifts closer to line of equality, you can imagine that that will be basically the case of lesser equality, right? So the further it gets from line of equality, more is the inequality. The closer it gets to line of equality, less is inequality, right? So this is basically what Lorenz curve says. Now let's understand a related concept called Gini coefficient, right? So Gini coefficient is also a basically measure of inequality, and this coefficient is basically calculated on the basis of Lorenz curve. Okay, so what how do we calculate Gini coefficient? For that, what we do that in the Lorenz curve, this area, the area between line of equality and Lorenz curve, let's say we call it A, and this area, the area between Lorenz curve and rest of this square, let's say call it B, right? Then Gini coefficient is equal to area A divided by area A plus B, right? So area A plus B is basically, if you see, this area of whole triangle, right? That will be basically summation of A and B, right? So you can imagine that this Gini coefficient will always be greater than 0 but lesser than 1, right? So this Gini coefficient value will always be greater than 0 but lesser than 1, right? So higher the value of Gini coefficient, that means when that will happen, when the value of area A is higher, right? So if Gini coefficient is higher, that means area A is higher. And what that will mean? That will mean that Lorenz curve is basically farther from line of equality, right? So in order to this area A become higher, this Lorenz curve will have to go farther from line of equality, right? So higher the Gini coefficient means higher the inequality, right? And if Gini coefficient is 0, when will that be case? That will be when area A is equal to 0, right? So that means area A, when this area A will be 0, when this Lorenz curve will actually be exactly lying on the line of equality. So that will be the case of perfect equality, because in that case Lorenz curve will be same as line of equality, right? And when Gini coefficient value is 1, that means when that will be the case, that will be when area B is equal to 0, right? Because Gini coefficient is equal to A upon A plus B, and in order to become 1, this B will have to be 0, because in that case it will be A by A then 1, right? So area B becoming 0, that means this Lorenz curve is shifting to here, right? This is what is the Lorenz curve, right? And so that means this Lorenz curve is basically farthest from the line of equality, the farthest possible, right? So that will be a case of perfect inequality. So that will be basically the case when just one person, so let's say if I draw it here, and Lorenz curve become like this. This is the line of perfect equality, and since area B is 0, Lorenz curve has shifted here on x-axis, right? So that means all the income are being earned by just one person, right? So that will be a case of perfect inequality. So this is pretty much it about Lorenz curve and the related concept Gini coefficient. In the next video, we will learn about a different economic curve. So stay tuned, friends. See you in the next video. Thank you.